Hey, what's going on, Jerk Faces? It's your boy Andy, and you're watching Nocturnal Transmissions brought to you by the Circle of Jerks podcast. It's a conversation you could be having during the day, but having at night. We're back um, with another riveting live stream for you guys.
It's
And
always riveting. I'm
it's
excited.
always riveting. It's always riveting.
Even when it says TBD, that doesn't
Right.
mean that there's going to be zero excitement.
Exactly. It's we'll figure something out. We got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We, make something beautiful together.
I'm pretty
But yeah.
excited to talk about what we have to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, we never. There's never a lack of things that we can talk about. But we will be talking about them all within the next hour and a half. So get comfortable, grab yourself a beverage, any kind, and let's
I got mine.
yeah, let's get this conversation started. So Rob, how you been the last couple days since I saw you?
Yeah, it's not like we haven't seen each other recently.
Right.
We were filming another riveting episode of the podcast, which
Absolutely.
so far I'd say is probably my favorite one that we've done so far.
Yeah, no, it was
Uh,
super fun. I wholly enjoyed myself with this podcast. Um,
I didn't want it to end. I really didn't want it to end.
yeah, it was a good podcast. We went deep. Let's try not to give everything away, but it was just a really good one because we just enjoyed ourselves and we enjoyed the subject matter.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it definitely helped. It definitely helped that we had our guest. I guess we can at least let people know the guests. We had Eric Nam on again. If you guys don't remember, he and his wife, and I think even their children, do make an appearance on
That's
the
true.
video podcast. So we had the entire family. But this episode, we only had Eric, and it was a good one. We all three of us are passionate about this subject, and I think it'll just show in the episode.
But besides that, let's see, I had work pretty much after we finished filming. I had to go to work a few hours after that, which was not. I was very tired, and
Mm.
I went to
Oh, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I went
we went
to
pretty late too. Were you
we
able to
did, but
get
it was worth it. It was fine.
Were you able to get any rest?
Not really. That's okay. It happens. It was worth it. It's sometimes you have to make sacrifices. So I chose to
Right.
sacrifice sleep.
Did you just stay up until you had to go to work?
I slept for a couple hours and I went there.
Okay.
It was not pleasant getting up. I'll say that though.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember back in the
But besides,
days having to wake
yeah,
up like super early, and it hurt my soul. That's how deep the pain went when I had to like wake up like super early.
yeah, that's why I kind of like when we set up our filming schedule. I was like, oh, that works out. Like because those are the Sundays that I don't really work.
Uh huh.
And then we ended up having to move it back a week because you went camping with your family. So
Right.
I was like, oh, this is gonna be because I was like, I really wanted to do this one. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be a rough, a rough weekend.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? It's all right. I don't mind making those sacrifices for the podcast, and it was worth it.
Well, I'm so happy you're a team player.
But besides that, I finished getting caught up on all of the MCU movies. I finished Ant-Man and the Wasp. I skipped Captain Marvel. I could have seen that before I saw Endgame,
Mm-hmm.
but I just
It would
I
have just
couldn't
pissed
bring
you
myself.
off and annoyed you. Trust me, because that's how I felt. I felt pissed
Well,
off and annoyed.
I will say before we do the review, yeah, I think she was annoying in in Endgame too. To be honest,
Yeah, even though she had a paltry 15 minutes of screen time.
yeah, and I hated those 15 minutes. That's that's one of my few knocks on the film.
those 15 minutes.
Yeah, out of the eight, but out of the 3 hours that those it's the rest of it was very good. I liked it a lot. And so yeah, so that's what I did since I've seen you. I saw Endgame. I finished watching all the movies um, up to Endgame and watch Endgame. And then today I was off, and because I couldn't quite get enough of Marvel, I purchased the Lego Marvel collection, so I could kind of continue on enjoying some of the Marvel characters.
Nerd alert. Oh, this guy.
I know. Well,
Um,
some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about today, it's also nerd alert
oh,
for different
jeez.
reasons.
Ah, jeez. You're taking away the cool factor, man. Stop it. Um,
I was
yeah, for
never cool.
me, yeah. I mean, other than recording with you and Eric on Saturday, Sunday was pretty standard. Monday, I just got right to it and started editing. Um, Man, it's just really hard to, it's so hard to keep track of the days when they just all kind of like bleed together.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just remembering that yesterday was Monday, and it's like, and I was just talking about it like as like Monday was like 4 days ago. It's like, oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's getting the days, and especially because I've been working so much, all the days just really just blend together, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, it's it sucks. I hate that. The older I get, the time seems to go by faster and faster.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because when you're young, time seemed to like time was like at a crawl, but now now as an adult, you're like you're on a bullet train.
I heard, and I wish I could remember where I saw this, but there's kind of like a mathematical equation as to why that works. That kind of
That
helps us to
phenomenon
understand
that
that.
happens.
Yeah, exactly. There's a like it's mathematics because as time goes on, the longer that we live,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time that like one day or 1 month is according to like our life is actually much shorter than it is when we're much younger. Um,
Well, I mean, yeah, because
it's
all humans are running towards entropy,
right
so it's
because
like
it's not a. I don't think it's a like just a uh, something in our heads. I actually think there's something real behind that.
huh. Could you imagine if we had a Old Testament longevity?
That'd be
Like
interesting to be
yeah,
honest. I
because if you think about it, I mean, the original plan was we weren't supposed to die,
right.
but
I would agree with that.
yeah, we weren't supposed to die, but because of the fall, because of temptation, because of sin, you know, we then had to succumb to mortal life, and I think it was like I think it was one of those things that was gradually bred out of us. Because when you read the genealogies, particularly, I mean, this only comes up to me now because my pastor is actually going over. the book of Genesis right now, and we're in chapter 6. Or last Sunday was chapter 6, and he went through the genealogies of Noah. Like everyone like lived for like at the most like 900 years, and Methuselah being the oldest at
Like
like
969, I think it
yeah
was what he ended
969.
up being.
And so imagine living for almost 1,000 years.
That would be
And
pretty
would and
intense.
and I mean I think because do you think that the aging would have been to the rate at which they'd be comparable to how we age now? So like when you're like 300, you're like in your 30s, or in like 50, when you're 500, you're like in your 50s. And
I think that's a possibility. I actually I think about that sometimes. Is it like that? I'm 100, but like am I really how we would see a 100-year-old person now who's just decrepit, or we know that they're closer to the end than they are at the beginning, whereas at that time you're
right,
really
because
just
like
at the
when
starting of life.
wait, because wait, I'm sorry. Oh no, there's no great detail uh, because the only like real great detail that in terms of like how someone is when they're old is Abraham, and he was like 90 when he was
But that's
90 when he
also
had when he had what's his face, Isaac. And
yeah.
the Bible describes him as being, an old man. And Sarah, who was just like I think like 10 years younger than him, like she was like in her 80s or something. She was also described as being, already old.
Right. Well, and that's also something we have to remember. That's post flood, and after Noah, the life
That's
rate
right.
dropped dramatically. It dropped, about like 400 or 500 years at least,
Right.
if not more.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a belief that because the what was part of what was used to create the flood was the water canopy that covered the earth, that was used for part of the flood, and with that no longer being a part of it, some of the like the sun rays and stuff uh, helped to kind of cause a degradation in um, what is it, the life cycle, as
Mm-hmm.
well as being further and further away from the tree of life, from the
Right.
Garden of Eden, because it was gone. It was essentially like it, if not gone completely, like buried somewhere in the
So
depths
was
of the
it
earth.
like also like it wasn't even like you had to eat from the tree of life, but like was there like did it emit some sort of like radiation that you know
I
you know
know that. See, that's just like a speculation on my part. I think there had to have been something where, uh, obviously they couldn't go back and eat of it because it was blocked off.
right.
Um, but the fact that it may have been still around, and that uh, yeah, I think plus with the how the Earth was back then,
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely much more prone to like long life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas after the flood, everything completely changed.
Right. Yeah. So like so
So the
like
world that once
pre-flood.
was is no longer there.
So pre-flood, could 100 years be the equivalent of only 10 years?
It's very possible, yeah.
So you could be 100 years old, but be only as old as how we perceive a 10-year-old.
I mean, if you could really think about it, yeah. I mean, obviously, like it was different time, but I think that's a pretty, you know, good comparison.
Right. Because I think when we think of like 900 years, we kind of we I think we think of it in terms of how we age now, and so like while when we're 100, we're old like feeble senile people, and like to stretch that over not 9 centuries, it's like how does someone live? But that couldn't be that couldn't be the case because at least I wouldn't imagine, because if you live that long, there's no way we would know, like, age 100 years the way we do now, and then still be in like that old decrepit age for the next 8 centuries.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. Like I think it's the aging process was also slowed down a lot more too. So
Recently,
yeah, it's probably
or back then?
back then. Like
Okay.
the aging process wasn't as much. That's why they lived a lot longer too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And if you really think about it, though, I think the like the shorter lifespans that we live now, I actually think that's mercy in a lot of ways because
yeah,
uh,
because
why would if we're obviously if like we're have like eternal life, which as believers we Christian believers we believe that we will live eternally at some point, but to have a 1,000-year lifespan with like no God or anything like that, and you're just filled with just this brokenness and sin, I think that's kind of a very harsh way to live. Because if
mm,
you think about like let's say today, right, we had the 1,000-year lifespans, yet people are with all the mental illness and depravity and depression and all that stuff. Would you want to live 1,000 years at that point?
oh hell no.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be really torturous. Um, but so I think it's kind of mercy that we only live as long as we do.
Right, and I mean, in the Bible it says, like, God saw like their depravity, their wickedness, and he because of that, he's like, all right, these people got to go. And like you were saying, how like the flood was partly from what was it that you said,
The water vapor canopy.
right, the water vapor canopy. And so yeah, so God, so yeah, so this was the flood in a lot of sense was almost like a mercy
Yeah, it's
from
and
God.
yeah, I would agree with that. And it was even like even that though didn't like kind of really eradicate the sin that was there because it ended up coming back just as strong uh,
Well, right,
than it ever
because
was.
even though, yeah, because no, yeah, just I mean, even though Noah, found favor, in God or with God, that doesn't mean that he was free from sin, or like,
Right.
or his offspring, or his sons, and and definitely not his wife, or his stepdaughters, or not stepdaughters, daughters-in-laws.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they were better than the majority, but they still carried that the stain of sin.
Yeah, and it just they got passed down to another new set of generation. Um, but it's I love looking at Genesis because it's some people think it's just like legend or fantasy,
Hmm.
but I do believe it to be true that it's a historical narrative. It's just kind of sharing it's not necessarily giving us a like a recipe for like this is how you're supposed to live. It's just saying this is how things were. It
Hmm.
was just more of some people will. I'm probably in the minority in authorship of Genesis because most people will say like, oh, that Moses is the one that wrote it, and I actually believe that he's just the one that compiled it together along with the other four books. I believe that there were several authors of Genesis as time went on,
Hmm.
and because I'm not a big believer in oral tradition, I tend to believe that oral tradition is can be corrupted, uh, and so it makes sense that to me that
Well,
they
I
wrote that
mean,
stuff
yeah,
down
I,
instead of
I I get that too, but I think back then there was a stricter honor code. When it came to oral traditions, and I think and I think to amend or augment a story, especially from someone like that someone was highly revered, was tantamount to sacrilege to kind of mess with the words.
That and like I said, I understand that part, and I think the argument for oral tradition is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I just like I said, I'm the minority when it comes to I would say yeah, I'm probably in the minority when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that I'm like, oh, my way is the right way. This is just my personal speculation on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I do agree with that assessment that yeah, there was a deeper honor code um, back
Right. Yeah.
then.
I was just stating it so other people could hear the other side.
Yeah, that's why I said I probably like I'm in the minority.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why. Yeah. And again, yeah, that's why you prefaced it. But yeah, just I just thought it'd be nice, just be helpful to offer a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, since we are talking a little bit about the Bible, which is one of my other many of the subjects that I enjoy talking about, it's definitely right up there. I actually bought a because there's been a lot of talk, especially in the news, with some of our politicians that are out there that are trying to use the Bible in I think either it's being quoted incorrectly with like stuff that's just not in it, which makes you think that it's not even close to like it being in the Bible. It's just something that they made up that they think sounds biblical.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of shows you that they've never read it once in their life, probably.
Right. I mean,
Or
it's kind of like the what is it the what is it the Ezekiel 25:17 from Pulp Fiction, where Quentin Tarantino he has a they say like this is like his reinterpretation of of the verse, but the actual verse is in that quote. It's just at the very end, of the recitation, which is and I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger, and you'll know that my name is the Lord when you when when I lay my vengeance upon you. That's that last bit. That's the entire Ezekiel 25:17. So I
right.
know there's a lot of people who went into the Bible looking for exactly what Samuel Jackson said, or Samuel Jackson's character said, but all they found was this one little line, which is the thing they said at the very end.
Right, and don't get me wrong, I love that whole like line from Pulp Fiction. It's a
Right.
great Samuel Jackson like reciting that whole
Yeah,
like
that
that
delivery.
monologue
Yeah,
is
his
fantastic.
delivery was amazing.
But yeah, it's kind of that thing, or people are trying to use the Bible in a way to justify something that I don't think it really justifies.
Right.
And so and I obviously I've spent a lot of time studying the Bible, but I haven't done anything like super real serious study wise
Mm-hmm.
in a little while, and so I kind of wanted to. I bought some new books, along with
Just quickly,
potentially.
I don't, and I think, and I think, admittedly, we are both believers, and we lean to, and we're more on the right wing politically, but we're not, we're not condemning the other side of doing it because our side does it just as much.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot
And
of
so
people
yeah, so
who
let's
are
get so
they're
let's get this let's get this clear. We're not just attacking like the left. We're also holding our side accountable when they try to use scripture and and verse to try to support their positions.
yeah, exactly, but they're still doing it wrong, and
Or
that's not right.
right, or try to justify and support their positions when they're wrong.
exactly. And so that's why I think it's important for guys like you and me
Mm-hmm.
to really like do some the tough study to even like when and to make sure that we're talking about when we do talk about the Bible, that we're while we might not always necessarily agree theologically or whatever, but we are doing something that's biblical. And
Mm-hmm.
so I bought some new books just to kind of like that pique my curiosity about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I like like the history of the Bible that's involved, and I like just like and how to like we can better study the Bible. So one book that I urge like beginners who are like trying to understand the Bible better and better read it.
Mm-hmm.
I would highly, highly, highly recommend a book called Grasping God's Word.
Mm-hmm.
It's by J. Scott Duvall and J. Daniel Hayes, and it's actually they do a very interesting job of breaking down how to best study the Bible, and they kind of give you like a 5 point roadmap on how to best go about studying the Bible. And throughout, yeah, it looks rather big, but actually, it's a really easy read, and a lot of it is just giving you like a lot of examples, and it actually gives you some like exercises that you can do to it's kind of utilizing that 5 step plan throughout your Bible reading. And I actually think this is a real good beginner book, which I
Mm-hmm.
always encourage the people I'm teaching to take a look at. And I think once we can better read it, there's a lot of other ways we can go. I got a was it the Moody Atlas of the Bible? Because I think understanding where the hell these people are traveling, or the places that empires were at, or the tribes of Israel where they were located at. It's like, well, when we just read in the Bible, sometimes it's just this like, okay, I don't know where that's at.
Right,
So
because
this
yeah,
gives
because
us like,
even though they might give a detailed account of where it is, but you're talking about towns or cities or rivers that that no longer exist, and so it's a bit of a it's a bit of a task to try and grasp where exactly this particular city is or was.
yeah, exactly. I also got what is it? The this Bible charts, maps, and timelines. And so this gives like kind of breaking down some of the genealogies, and like also it's a map book and like gives you some charts on some certain things.
Hmm.
And so this one's been by I haven't like really dove into this one just yet. The book that I also started reading was the hermeneutics of the Bible writers, and hermeneutics is like a $5 word for it's mainly how they it's interpreting the Bible. It's a study of doing that, and this book is actually kind of cool because the a lot of it talks about the New Testament writers, so like Paul and Peter and all those guys, and how they understood Old Testament scripture, and how they interpreted it and understood it, and why they used it in certain places for in the New Testament.
Hmm.
So I started kind of diving into this, and it's pretty interesting so far because I think it's kind of important that for us to understand how the writers understood Scripture, the writers of the Bible understood Scripture, and that's anytime you're studying the Bible, you're not reading into it, you're taking away from it. So you have to better understand the authors and why they wrote certain things. And I bought a bunch of like books on hermeneutics and just some ways to better understand that. Um,
Really quickly. That's a really interesting thing that you said. That it's not what you bring to it; it's what you get out of it. And I think what I think the thing that kind of gets annoying for guys like you or me is that people are taking the word of God and and extracting what they want or they need it to mean.
Right. Yeah.
to,
Exactly.
to fit their
Well,
purpose, to fit their agenda, to for or what have you. Like in, instead of taking what it's actually saying.
yeah, and we have to understand that. Yeah. Well, it is a book, or an anthology of books that were written for us to better understand God and how to live. It's still a book that was written at its earliest is still a couple of millennia old, and so we can't expect our how we view the world today from our experiences to expect to read that into the Bible. It doesn't work. So you have,
Right.
and that was why I like this book called Grasping God's Word, because they talk about how you have to build that bridge from that time period to now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just like it's a slight skip over the river, or you had to do, or in some cases you had to build a very large bridge because to figure out like what
Right.
exactly was
Right.
going on at that time, and figure out why they wrote in that way at
Mm-hmm.
that time, and to understand the audience, and then from that kind of take away what works for today.
Right. So I think one of the things that people do nowadays is they take literally out of context. Um, when they use literally, because people always say like, "Oh, do you take the Bible literally or figuratively?" It's like, um, I
Well, it
think,
depends on what you read, which one you read. It depends on
well, right, it's
which
like because actually, the actual meaning for literal, is of the literature, whatever, so as the style that it's in. So if it's historic, so I take it literally depending on the style. So I take it for what it is. So if it's history, I take it as history. If it's poetry, I take it as a poetry. um, if it's a letter or an epistle, then I take it for as it's a letter.
yeah, and
And I think
it
that's
like I
what
said,
I
that's
think that's and I think people like they have this thing, they have this thing in their mind saying like, uh, even though they think just because the Bible is bound in like one book, they think it all lines up perfectly. When it in fact is actually like you said, it's an anthology. It's a collection of different books, and you have to take each thing, each book literally, as in the style of.
right. So it's and there's a lot to be taken away, but like, obviously, like if you read like something like Isaiah or Revelations, like literally as far as what it's saying is that's exactly what's going to happen. Well, you're going to get probably some crazy ideas, whereas if you understand it as something that's using like metaphorical usage to teach a greater point,
Right.
that's something else. Whereas then you have something where you look at some of the historical narrative books, like Genesis or Exodus, but you're reading it metaphorically like it's a legend. You're not going to get like what it was intended,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just kind of telling the story of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people just like I said, they look at the Bible as this monolith,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the if you just kind of dive in somewhere, and it's like, oh, I like this part of it, but then you don't take another part of it seriously. It's like, well, it's I don't know. A lot of people I think just misunderstand right away what the Bible is all about. So
Mm-hmm.
because you're looking at things face value, and it says something that at face value looks very uncomfortable. Like one of the things that I hear at times is that, oh, the Bible promotes slavery. It's like, well, actually it does not. In some cases, you when you look at some of the Old Testament law, it's realizing it's not it realizes the reality and the sin of the people, and understanding that slavery is just a reality of the time, and understanding that it's sinful. And it's like, if you are going to engage in this style of practice, here's the rules. And what was supposed to happen too is that um, it was like the air every, think like 50th year or so, like everything was supposed to be like reset. It was called the year of jubilee, and
Right.
so all the debts were wiped out. All the Because you could sell yourself into slavery to pay a debt, so it was indentured servitude.
Right.
And that's kind
Yeah.
of
I
like
mean,
that's
yeah, because
what it's.
right, because
But
like
all
even
that
in the
stuff after
time,
that.
right, in the time of the Romans, slavery was an economic system, and it wasn't exactly the same as what we think of, like early American slavery, where
Right, the Atlantic
where it
slave
was like
trade.
chattel slavery, but in essence you were selling, or you were enslaving the work of that individual, not the individual themselves.
Right, and that's the other thing too. Is like, well, what is slavery? How did they understand slavery as opposed to what we know of slavery? Which that's something that we also have to take into account as well, and that also takes study.
Hmm.
Um, and we actually find that the slavery of what we read about in the Bible is actually very, very different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they, yeah, because there were laws governing slavery,
Yeah,
and and it wasn't like early colonial slaves where they were just property and you own them forever. Um, but yeah, but like in the Bible, there's specific rules saying like how you're supposed to treat your slave, and what you could expect from your slave, what you can't expect from your slave. Even giving slaves like days off.
yeah, and that's not it's not necessarily saying that we're not saying that that type of slavery is right either. It's just, but
Right.
it's
Right. It's
we the Bible is like, a lot of times is recording just about like what the reality of the situation was at the time. Not necessarily, it wasn't prescription; it was just description.
right. Kind of similarly, or I mean, not exactly, but it's like people used to wear wigs back in the day. You know, it was just one of those things that was kind of customary within the culture.
Right?
It wasn't bad or good. It just was.
Yeah. Let's see. What are some of the other ones that I picked up? I also
Oh, can I ask you a
I
quick
got
question?
yeah.
Because I heard a really interesting interpretation of something that Jesus said, and it's the turn the other cheek, uh, quote. Some
It's turning of the cheek. Okay.
yeah, turn the cheek, and this interesting interpretation that I heard was, it wasn't because like Satan, or Christians are sadomasochistic. That it's like, oh, if you get smacked on one cheek, then offer the other cheek. It wasn't because like we're pacifists, or we're sadomasochists. But the interpretation this one person proposed was that Jesus was saying not to never act, but to make the reaction worth it. So don't react out of from one smack, you know get smacked again, so it's worth it.
Huh. That's I can honestly say I haven't heard that one before.
Right. I mean, I just happened upon this interpretation myself, and so I thought that was very interesting, because everyone thinks that Jesus was like this pacifist hippie, but
He
he got
wasn't.
angry. He flipped the tables, the money changers in the temple, and he got cord together, and he whipped people, and he chased them out, the sellers of like doves and stuff out of the temple. But it was
Yeah.
it wasn't like his action, his reaction or his aggression wasn't wasn't unmerited and wasn't unprovoked.
Huh. That's I'll be honest. I'm gonna have to go back and kind of look at that verse, and because I haven't studied that that in a little bit, so I might have to go back and like kind of see what I think about that. Because right now, based off of what you're telling me, I haven't thought of that before,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Right, because
But yeah,
because of like the social like structure, like having like classes and things. So if if a higher caste person were to strike a lower class person, they would need more of a sufficient reason to retaliate
right,
against the higher caste person. So once like one smack, I guess for Jesus one smack was enough, and it's like so yeah, so offer him, make give offer him your other cheek, really make it worth it.
yeah. But at the but that idea of turning the other cheek, or things, some of the other teachings of Jesus, and even some of the stuff that's talked about in the Bible, it's some of what's said is difficult. It's sometimes not only difficult to understand, but sometimes like difficult to incorporate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great book by Norman Geisler and Thomas Howe, and I think they've done a couple of books on this topic, but it's called the Big Book of Bible Difficulties, and it kind of goes through, and they have a couple, some of the 5 points that they want to hit on for why they do this. It's kind of a critical commentary of the Bible. It's an apologetics text. Talks about the difficult like verses in Scripture. Gives some of the theology behind some important doctrines, and it's also a handbook on verses misused by cults, which is also very important.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it talks about like some of the things like uh, in one instance is there's some of the things that are said by Paul in his epistles, especially concerning like women and leadership in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Especially today, that's a very difficult uh, difficult verse to deal with.
Right. I think, well, speaking to people misquoting or taking the but taking extracting what they need out of a particular passage or verse for their own needs. There's that I think in was it I think it's in Corinthians where they talk about women being subjugated by men when in fact it says wives submit to your husbands. It doesn't make a blanket statement about women having to submit to men, but it talks very specifically about a marriage covenant, and if you are married, you know if you are a wife, you are to submit to your husband. And then also,
Well,
but conversely, husbands are then commanded to love their wives and to treat them well.
right. Well, and see that there that's I'm glad you brought that up, because see, people will only read wives submit to your husbands. Oh, it's so misogynistic. It's like, but they don't read the whole context, or the even the whole of that verse that talks about how it's, yes, wives submit to your husbands, but yeah, but husbands love respect your wives as
Mm-hmm.
Christ has loved and respected the church. It's this whole, like, it's not just in essence, both parties are submitting to one another under God's umbrella, and it's
Right, and
it's a it's
the marriage covenant is a mirror for the covenant that God Christ has with the church.
and see that it's in a lot of throughout history, both parties, men and women, have misunderstood that, where men have done historically have abused that. Wives submit to your husbands and have
Correct.
treated them like shit.
Correct.
But
Correct.
now we're getting the opposite effect of women treating men like garbage, and it's creating this cycle of where there's no love in the relationship, and that's why
Right.
we have a lot
Because
of failed marriages and broken relationships.
right. Because they because people have used particularly particularly feminists. They taken that verse and completely subverted it and turned men into an adversary, and they've taken it completely out of the original context, which was in a marriage covenant between a man and a woman, but more importantly, a husband and a wife.
Right. Well, and that's also one of the failings of right from the fall was that God said that the that the woman was always going to be at enmity with the man um, after the fall, and it's kind of like that's this type of prescription that was given is to wives, like submit to your husbands, and husbands respect your wives. It was kind of a way to, now that we are being restored unto what we were initially supposed to be. This is a correction to that point. It doesn't make it any less difficult, but like to do. But especially at that time, it was a radical idea.
Hmm.
Still kind of is in a lot of ways because it doesn't happen a lot.
Right.
Another interesting book, a couple interesting books I picked up were it was the Illustrated Dictionary of the Bible, and this actually goes into I picked up a couple of different like dictionary-ish Bibles or
Hmm.
dictionary books, and essentially what it does is it talks about like some of the um, historical like certain concepts. Like if you want to understand a certain theology or a certain word a little bit better, it talks about that and the context that it's used in the Bible. Or if you wanted to learn more about a person or a place that's mentioned in the Bible, um, and in some cases, in these ones that I have, it actually shows pictures of certain things. And then same thing. This one here is called Dictionary of Jesus and the Gospels, and this deals more with like kind of even going a little bit more nuanced with like more New Testament stuff. Um, I also picked up a book that hasn't arrived yet called Bible Manners and Customs, and that kind of is a tool to help you better understand how the people lived at that time. So when you're reading through books like Exodus or Romans, you're gonna be able to better understand how the people lived. And so when you hear something that seems a little bit like, why did they do this, or why did they say this? And then when you better understand how they lived, oh, that makes a little bit more sense now. Now I understand why they're talking like that, or why that's being written down.
Right. To give one example, I think when Jesus meets us, the Samaritan woman at the well.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
people will be like, "Oh, well, what's the big whoop?" Well, because he says, that he meets her like, what is it? It wasn't midday. It's like 9 o'clock.
yeah. It was at like the um, yeah, it was at a very odd point of the day where like there wasn't a lot of people there.
Right. And typically, back in those days, since they didn't have running water, they would go and fill a large jug of water for the entire day, and that was usually in the
Right.
morning. And because they were, and because they live in an arid, desert region, doing something in the middle of the day, and especially like lugging back a giant jug of water, it's going to be hard. and
Right. Well, and
very
that was also that was a center of culture for that was where everyone gathered to talk and share their day and
that's right, yeah,
interact.
right, and so this Samaritan woman was there because she didn't want to be seen. She endured the scalding heat, because she was a social outcast because because she was a known sinner.
Yeah.
And back in the day, that really meant something, and like that social ostracization was a real thing.
Yeah.
And so like
Um,
people when they read that story, it's like, oh, what's the big deal? She's just getting water. It's like no, you have is the kind of customs you have to understand. Like all the women went like before the sun came up to go get water, and they all come and gather, and they talk and talk and converse like as they're getting water. Like, oh yeah, Mary, how's your husband? Like, oh, he constantly snores. And like, but for this woman, there wasn't that social interaction.
yeah. That was the Twitter and Facebook and Instagram of the day. That was
Right.
the phone of the day, because that was how you
Hmm.
conversed with your friends and
Right. That
shared.
was the ancient world party line.
Yeah, and she was, and the Samaritan woman was essentially banned from Twitter when she
Yeah.
when she was.
Yeah. She got too many hard strikes.
Yeah.
She went against she went against the TOS.
Yeah. Um. But yeah, no, Oh, the other thing too. One last one. Before. Is I bought a book called "Identifying the Seed," and um, there are two schools of thought when it comes to how God has interacted with, as we see in the Bible. One that I'm part of this school of thought is something called dispensationalism, and what that
Hmm.
means is that there's different ages, or like, as far as how not that God has changed, but the way that He dealt with people changed. Based off of you can kind of see there's a difference between how God dealt with people, before the flood, then after the flood, then when the law came in, and then obviously with New Testament times, how God dealt with people was much different.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
essentially what uh, there's these different ages per se.
Hmm.
And then there's another a school of thought called covenant theology, and it's kind of similar in the sense where yeah, but it more breaks it down based off of like the different covenants that God has proposed throughout Scripture.
Hmm.
Um, and so this book here kind of it gives an examination of both and evaluates them, and it talks about the differences and comparisons. And I think this would be kind of a good book to as far as if you want to like understand that type of stuff, which I think kind of helps. You can kind of break break the Bible down even a little bit more, and it gives you just like a little bit of a better understanding of how I can see Exodus, or I can see things from the Old Testament differently than I would in the New Testament. It's not all just some big monolith.
Hmm.
There's differences, and this kind of I think it'll help someone maybe break that down a little bit better.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I might even ask to borrow some of those books.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh, it's the other one I forgot is the another kind of like so it's similar to the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. I have the Hard Sayings of Paul.
Hmm.
So kind of like what I was saying. The if you wanted to understand a little bit better of what he was saying, concerning like women in the church, this will have that because it's all about like Paul's epistles. There's
Hmm.
also one of the Hard Sayings of Jesus too, which I have already. That one's pretty good too. Kind of, and if you wanted to break down, turning the other cheek, or some of the other stuff that he said that seems kind of difficult. It gives you a little bit maybe a breakdown of those verses and what they actually mean. And I think these are all good. These don't replace needing to read the Bible. That's you need to do that, but it also doesn't hurt. Like if when you don't understand, to use the footholds that people from the early church throughout church history or even today that are doing good scholarly biblical work. Um, it doesn't hurt to use the handhelds that they've created for us to use. But ultimately, you got to read the Bible, even if like you're not always going to understand everything right away. Um, and I'm saying this to Christians in general, because there's a lot of us that don't read our Bibles, that don't understand what it's talking about. And Christianity, I think it's not quite here in the U.S., but it's definitely under attack, and we need to arm ourselves better. To the point where we can defend it a lot better, because that's really not happening today. At least as far as the common, you don't necessarily have to be a theologian or a missionary or a pastor, but it still is important to know this stuff and to at least have a rudimentary idea of what the hell is going on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually my church is actually doing a course on apologetics, and for those of you who don't know, simply I know apologetic sounds like it sounds like apology, but it
We're not
actually just
apologizing
means
for the
to make a
Bible.
defense.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my church is doing a course on apologetics, and it's really interesting, fascinating stuff. Um, and I am finding myself incorporating more and more of what I've been learning. But I would disagree with you on one thing, and that is the attack of okay, maybe not Christians, but definitely Christianity in this country. And I guess this
Well,
it'd be
I
a
mean,
good way.
what I meant by it is that we're not under like physical attack.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
Like we're not.
that's a fair enough
Yeah,
distinction. That's a
that's
fair
what I
enough
meant by
distinction.
that.
Yeah, that's a
We
fair
are
enough
under
distinction.
attack. Yes.
Yeah, fair enough distinction. But yeah, so I guess this will be a decent segue into the next topic, which is um, Pennsylvania State legislator Brian Sims, uh,
Dirtbag galore.
dirtbag, piece of shit, uh, uh, you know, uh, you know, busting out a smartphone, going onto I believe it's Periscope is the app, which is owned by Twitter, and and putting people on blast, particularly minors and the elderly. And if you haven't seen it, there it's online, it's up there, it's out there. Um, there are a group of there's a group outside of a Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia. Uh, I think it was the video that I saw. It was like two adults and three minors, and like obvious minors. And Brian Sims, just he was across the street, and he kind of charges over there and like gets the camera in their faces, and he's like demanding uh, that these adults and these three minor girls give them uh, their personal information, like what's their name, where do they live, what's their school, what have you. And it's just like, it's the most disgusting thing you've ever seen. I mean, but it shouldn't be that surprising when they're basically calling for the blood of like those Covington Catholic kids, and they were minors,
Yeah.
and no one said anything about that. And so like and I think what and I'm sure what he did goes against Twitter's TOS. I know we were joking about kind of TOS's a short while ago, but this is obvious incitement to violence. This is threatening, which is against Twitter's TOS. So Jack, if you're listening, if you're out there, baby, uh, you better kick this guy off.
I mean, it's like it's fine. Like, okay, if that's how it's gonna be with with certain people that you're calling out for, quote unquote inciting violence, even though it wasn't. But then actual like incitement of where he's trying to put people's life in danger.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that get taken away? It's like I'm fine if that's I mean, I'm fine if like you have crazy ideas or whatever, but if that's how it's gonna do, then fine. Just if you're just not gonna just take out everybody then, and it'll
Right. I
just be
mean,
this
yeah, because like
banal like space that we all kind of interact in.
right to I mean I to reference the the Joe Rogan podcast where Tim Pool and Jack Dorsey and whoever that that lawyer lady was on, yeah, whatever her face was on, and they would constantly what is it, um, they would constantly say that like Alex Jones did was kicked off because of such and such reason, hate speech or whatever. And when Tim Pool pushed them on that and said, okay, what did he exactly say? Exactly say they weren't able to they weren't able to cite it. Like the only thing that they were able to cite was that he put up a GIF of this kid getting like smacked in the head or something, and said that that was a promotion of violence or whatever. And it was a meme, so it was shared by a bunch of people. But for some reason, because Alex Jones shared it, that's reason enough for him to be deplatformed.
Yeah, which that's not a reason like that, and they know what memes are. Like, it's not like it wasn't him smacking a kid in the head. It was a
Right.
meme that like from like God knows, maybe like a movie or something, like who knows what it was
Right, yeah,
from.
and it's like it's a meme is just a cultural artifact that expresses a thought or an idea that collectively, societally, we all understand. So it could have
Right.
been like a kid getting smacked in the head, and it's like when little brother tries to take your stuff, and like the response would be to smack him in the head. And it's like
Exactly.
everyone gets that because it's a common experience within our society. So we instantly get that joke.
But it's like but that what's crazy is these people that create all this stuff, yet they're acting like they're 90-year-old senators who've never touched a computer in their life. All of a
Right. Oh,
sudden, it's
and
we gotta
the
ban that.
funniest thing was, Tim like called him out on this, and it was hilarious because like that lawyer chick, she turned into a actual NPC.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh well, thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we will use it to make a better platform. It's like press one for director. But it was like that. She like the response was that robotic and like detached.
Yeah, it was pretty like which means that like they aren't gonna do a goddamn thing.
Right? Or they're like so incompetent, but they're still in charge of this stuff. It just shows like their
It's either
incompetence.
it's either incompetence uh or it's evil. It's one of the
It's either
it's one of the two.
incompetence, apathy, or
They willingly know what they're doing.
yeah. But I say it's all three.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they know that
that's possible.
because like they're so out of touch that that they're indifferent to it. But there's but but they know what they're doing. They know like they got their orders from above them, so they're just implementing it. So and so.
But to go back to um, Sims.
Mhm. Right.
Here's where it's bad enough if this was just Joe Schmo off the street who was a pro-choicer or something like that, but the
Hmm.
fact that this is a elected uh, person in government that was elected.
Right. Right. Yeah. He. Yeah.
And,
He. It could dare be argued that he approached these people under the color of authority.
yeah, and so he not only is he abusing his authority, but the fact that he's trying to dox these minors and this to the fact to what end? To obviously, I think it's to bring harm to them.
Right. I mean, yeah. It's not like, oh, I want to know, give me your address so I can come over and we can have a nice civil debate. No,
That's not what's going to
that's
happen
not what's
because
happening. Like he wants violence to be done upon these people.
yeah, it's one of the most disturbing things that I've seen in a while.
Right. I mean,
Like,
is no less disturbing than when crazy low IQ Maxine Waters was telling people at that toy charity drive in LA. It's like, oh, if you see someone from the Trump administration, you get in their face, you tell them they're not welcome here anymore. Again, she's an elected
that's an incitement of
representative.
violence. Why is she still on? Like, why does she still have a platform to talk?
Exactly. Again, it's the same thing with this Brian Sims guy. They're elected people, they're elected officials, and you can dare say that they're inciting their followers under the color of authority.
Yeah,
And yet there's Maxine's still in the Congress. This Brian Sims guy, I'm sure he's still part of the legislature. I mean, hopefully not for long, but
but this is the they all call like conservatives or anyone that disagrees with them Hitler, and you're part of the Nazi party. It's like, yet that's exactly what they're doing.
yeah, it's
Silence
yeah.
anyone who disagrees with your platform.
Oh yeah, I gotta share with you a video. It's really chilling because it's basically back in like the 60s or late 60s or maybe like early 70s. Um, Dissidents within communist dissidents within the United States got this cable from Russia saying how this is kind of like this is your plan of attack from here on in. If anyone comes out against you, call them a racist, call them a Nazi, call them a whatever, and then if and basically just accuse them until like it's repeated enough that it becomes a truth.
Yeah, that's oof.
And that was a cable, and that was a communique sent by unknown forces within Russia to uh, communist or Soviet dissidents in the United States. And guess what's happening now? If anyone disagrees with you, you automatically slander them, call them a racist, call them a Nazi, call them a Islamophobe, a homophobe, a whatever phobe, and you keep saying it until people start believing it.
Yeah, it's a intellectually scary time.
I don't know. I think yeah, because it's funny because recently people what is it? Owen Benjamin he says that the right is designed to lose. We're the Washington Generals.
Yeah, yeah,
To the
yeah,
left's Harlem Globetrotters, and it's true. It's true. And I think it's because we are, or people on the right and like people in the middle, we're the majority. It's these is this crazy leftists that are screaming just the loudest right now. But I think we have to provide pushback. And I think we have to let Twitter know that this is not going to stand.
Yeah. Uh, it's just it's crazy, man. Yeah, I know. Was it the other? I think it was a couple weeks ago now, but like, yeah, I kind of got into it with a few people who, yeah, they wanted to say like, oh, you're such racist. Like, okay, how? And then they can't provide any reasons, and it's like, yeah, and I was like, listen, yeah, there are like maybe like five people left that kind of saying that hyperbolically, that hold these really shitty opinions about like race and stuff, but that's it. Where it really comes from is these people who are claiming everyone else is racist, but what they're saying is actually like telling that black people that like, oh, you're always going to be a victim, and like this is why you're like this, and rely on us and we'll protect you, and all this other stuff, instead of like empowering them to which the law already does empower them, that they can essentially like, you're just as equal as the next person.
Right.
Or you have like the whole idea where they're doing this, oh well, we don't have enough of this race or that race, so um, we're gonna keep back like these other races and say like, oh, like they don't like fit our
Exactly.
profiles. Like, well,
Well,
wait a
yeah, because
second.
that's
Like, how is that not like what you're claiming that everyone else is?
right. I mean, because that's all you have. Honestly, all you have to do is shut someone up. Who does that is like, well, explain how, why.
They can't. They
Exactly,
can't.
and then they can't because then all they do is spiral, and then they call you
Then
Nazi.
they,
They call you Nazi,
yeah.
racist, homophobe or whatever, and just like he's like, okay, what It's like, what else you got?
Well, and that's why I was like, that's essentially what happened to me, where it's like, okay, well, so you have no argument, so you have to like be a baby and shout racism.
Yeah, and throw a
So it doesn't
tantrum,
mean
basic.
anything.
Yeah, you
It doesn't
basically
mean
throw a
anything. I
tantrum.
won the argument already.
It's like, yeah, you throw a tantrum, you win the argument. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's how babies work. That's not how adults work. It's like the whole idea of like the immigration thing. It's like, okay, well, how many more brown people do we need till everything is equal? It's like, oh, it was like, or like Trump is a racist. It's like, oh, well, was he a racist when he was high fiving Jesse Jackson?
Yeah, when he's in every, like he was in a lot of rap songs in the '90s when they loved Donald Trump.
When they're all when every black when every rapper because again, not every rapper is black, but every but like they're all on his nuts and like referencing him because they wanted to be like Donald Trump. They wanted to be mega ballers.
Even Barack Obama said that, like the kind of the that Trump is one of the ideals of the American dream.
There you go. Yeah, was he racist? Was he racist then?
Terribly. Well, and then even then, it's like, oh well, he's literally Hitler, which is like, okay, that's not how language works, because if he was
Right.
literally Hitler, he'd be a zombie. But
Yeah,
but
and
no,
then
I feel like it's like,
why would zombie Hitler go orange? I don't. That doesn't track to me.
yeah, but it's saying that like, oh, he's Hitler, he's a Nazi, he's racist, and he's going to turn us into this racist hell, American, to this racist hellhole, like even worse. Like, how? What policy is he creating that makes it worse?
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, because they are like constantly need to be the
what
victim, and
law?
it's like
Yeah,
the
it's like,
what is it like the news people, they kept saying, oh, this is a front to our first the First Amendment, free press. Like, how? It's like, what law has he passed? What executive order has he pushed through to silence you? Because every
now
single
that
night Brian
that's
Stelter's on there Brian Stelter's on CNN every night talking about how Trump colluded with the Russians, and how Stormy Daniels is a hero for stepping up, and blah blah blah. It's like he's letting you say it. He's letting you say all your lies, and
Yeah,
you're
and it's like,
accusing him of you're accusing him of silencing you. It doesn't really track.
and in fact, here's the other thing. Well, yes, he has expressed his displeasure at like some of the people from CNN, namely Jim Look at Me Acosta. But like he's actually expanded the press house, the White House press.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's just like they he just opened it up to the competition, which is the alternative media.
yeah, he's not just including like Tucker Carlson from Fox News and everyone else is ousted from the room. Like it's just, and yes, he's expressed displeasure at like some of the way he's been treated on in the media, which rightfully so, to be honest.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, whenever Trump goes against them, like they just constantly whine about it.
they owe him for their ratings, to be
I know
honest.
exactly. I always tell people, who always say like, oh, Trump is gonna get impeached and blah blah blah. He's gonna be out. I go, well, yeah, like that it sucks for CNN. And they're like, why? It's like because the ratings are gonna go down because all they do is talk about Trump. And people people who watch CNN are just constantly like, looking for like that like he's he's gonna get it this time, we're gonna get him this time, but it never happens. But after if Trump loses the election or he's no or he runs his he runs his 2 terms, then after that, like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
What do they do? And let's say that Mike Pence runs, and he gets elected. What is Mike Pence now? Mega's double Hitler?
Well, that's the other thing. It's like, and then yeah, they keep like producing this lie that oh he wants gay conversion therapy. It's like that he's never ever done that.
Right. Yeah. Again, taking him out of context.
Even in like the bill that he was saying, what it was saying that like that people who felt like that you know it doesn't matter if like they were gay or whatever, but they were I think it was based off of if had they been through some sort of like abuse or like felt like they needed therapy for, and it was helping to provide a way for them to get therapy for um for whatever it was. And
Hmm.
it was actually a very, I think, a great thing of what he
Right.
was
I think
trying to
yeah, it
do.
was very compassionate. It was very compassionate of the homophobe to offer that.
And the other, and what's crazy, they made fun of him for like saying like how misogynistic he was for only wanting to have, not wanting to be alone with another woman on like at like for a dinner or in like a room alone with them. And it's like, yeah, you know what you also can't like accuse him of is being like a rapist or some sort of philanderer, which is essentially what we're getting all on the left.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
And
except I mean, excluding like maybe what's his face from Alabama,
Roy Moore,
Roy Moore. Yeah. Other than that guy, is there
and that guy, yeah, that guy did it,
right
and
the
was
the
right for the
fallout of
media.
Me Too? Like, who's it been? Everyone who identifies themselves, as a Democrat or someone on the left.
Yeah,
I mean, again, I admit and I admit that there could be, right wing creepers, but I mean, so far we like the right only has Roy Moore. The left
but
has Al Franken, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Clinton, um,
yeah,
on and on and on and on.
the I mean, okay, I will concede the fact that the that Trump's record with women probably not great, but he's never raped anybody. He's never done something like unconsensual. I'm
Right,
not
or
even
at
saying that
least
right. Unconsensually.
okay. Well, let's make it a little bit more specific. Like thus far, nothing has been like proven proven that he's ever done this. Like that the Stormy Daniels stuff. Like it's like he admits to having an affair, and like he admits that he paid her off.
Yeah, which is not good, but like it was never something that he like. And it wasn't like that he held Stormy Daniels down and forced her.
Yeah.
She
It's
wanted
like
to
let's just
too.
yeah okay we can let's say that thus far nothing has been non-consensual. It's all been consensual.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. So from what
Yeah.
we know so far, that and like I said, I'm not like saying that the way he's treated women has been great.
Right. I mean, yeah, because I mean he doesn't drink, so like really
Yeah,
his really only foible is or peccadillo is women.
yeah, which I think is a lot of men's
Right.
foibles.
Yeah. Which is funny because it makes him kind of relatable.
Yeah,
Yeah. But thus far, no accusations of rape have stood the test. Like, because I know just before like the election, there's some women who accuse them of some sort of impropriety. I mean, not necessarily rape, but some sort of impropriety. But it's like the allegations didn't stand.
yeah, because I don't think he's that guy.
Right.
That is, yeah, he's a like you said, he's a philanderer in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and he likes women, but he's not
Right. Because
he's he's not a rapist.
right. Because here's the thing, Trump. No matter what you think of Trump is too alpha for that kind of behavior.
I would say he's the JFK of our day in that sense, as far as how he treated women.
Pretty fair comparison, yes. But
Because
yeah,
I don't think
but just his
I don't think
personality though, just his personality, he's very alpha.
yeah,
He doesn't need to coerce or to overpower or trick women into sleeping with him. I think
women
because
come to him.
yeah, women come to him and his personality is like he's pretty in clips from back in the day. He was a very charming man, or he is a very
Yeah,
charming man. And
well,
so
that's
like
where you look
it's
at
no surprise that people would be drawn to him.
yeah.
And so
Well,
and it's
and
and
that was the whole grab the pussy remark. It's like he was talking about how like yeah, when you're like that strong male figure that's popular as he is, it's like you could literally like you just go up to them and like grab them there just because that's what they want.
right, yeah, and again, it's like another example of them taking something out of context. It's like oh, like when you're rich and famous, they just come at you, like you can do anything, like they let you. Like yeah, they forgot that they omitted that part. That's like the they let you part.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we're a little bit we went into a little of the weeds again. But bringing it back to Brian Sims, here's this garbage person who is going to be protected because of his, of his particular, intersectionality. Being that he's a sodomite, he's going to be protected. But I
Yeah,
think,
it's just
but I think we, people should constantly put on, apply the pressure.
uh yeah, he's someone that the fact that he's an elected representative
Mm-hmm.
of well, at least in Pennsylvania, like I didn't elect him, but
Yeah.
the fact but the fact that he's an elected representative of government, that can't stand. You can't act like that. It's
Mm-mm.
one thing where like uh, it's fine. You want if you want to disagree, like you're pro-choice and you obviously are not pro-life. that's one thing, and that's its own thing. But the fact that where you're going up and as an elected representative, using your authority to accost and try to dox, elderly women and young teens, you should be ashamed of yourself. And that to me is using that authority like that. That's evil.
Mm.
And that's where we can't allow things like that to stand. You can't
Mm.
use authority. That's abusing authority.
Right. Yeah, and I hope people of Pennsylvania they recognize it. They do say something.
And
You
I
know.
and I hope that the conservatives in Pennsylvania, that they write in and they write in hard about getting this guy removed from office, because that can't be allowed to stand.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's something that would happen. If I could do anything from California about it, I probably would. I don't think I have any power or
Right. Yeah.
um
We. I mean, yeah. As Californians, we don't have a dog in that fight.
yeah, but
But we can hope, we
I
can
could, I would.
pray that the citizens of Pennsylvania do something about it.
Yeah, because that is a really dangerous precedent. And if that allows to stand, it's going to give more people like that, um, the feeling like they have the power to do stuff like that when regular citizens disagree with them.
Right. Yeah, and and if people, and I was gonna try to make a joke, but yeah, I mean, another angle of attack here could be like, oh, how dare this man with a penis, terrorize women.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too. Is like he's a the patriarchy. He's
I
attacking
know.
these
This guy is literally
these
the
old
patriarchy.
and young women.
Right? Yeah, this guy's literally the patriarchy, and he's using his authority to terrorize and harass women.
But
So keep
that's
that
one of
in
those things
mind.
like that. Yeah, but whatever.
Yeah.
We're just using the logic that the left wants to use. But whatever.
Right.
Hey,
Hey. Yeah. Don't take us out of
that's
context. That's the way you guys think, not the way we think.
yeah.
All right. Anyways,
Um,
let's.
that one last thing before we kind of move into our movie review, which I think that's where we're going, right, Andy?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I also picked up one other book that's it's not a biblical book, but it does talk about our first venture as a war as a country. It's the talk of the Barbary Wars that we
Mm,
went into, and it's the book I have is Thomas Jefferson's Quran, Islam and the Founders by Denise Spielberg, and it's talking about that very the Barbary Wars and what was actually going on, and um, it reminded me of what's her face's Rashida Tlaib and I forgot who the other person that used they were sworn in on the Quran that Thomas Jefferson
right.
held,
Was it
and they
Omar?
had no idea why he actually held it, for one. Um, and this book kind of talks about like why he had one, and talking about like how the ideals of the Islamic community does not match up with American freedom, and
Right.
I'm really excited. Someone recommended this to me, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really excited to dive in. I'm thinking about buying you a copy too, by the way.
Mm. Yeah, I just might get myself a copy. But it's hilarious though. I just realized that here's Thomas Jefferson, the supposed slave rapist, but because he has a Quran, it's like, oh, this guy's cool,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Well,
They
think
constantly
about it.
decry Thomas Jefferson as like this slave owner and slave rapist, and he's such an evil man. but you're not um, he's not below you enough to not use his Quran that he used to say that yeah, Islam is incompatible with America.
Well, here's the other thing too: is that for him uh, going to war with the Barbary pirates, he was also freeing people from slavery. Oh, hey, how about that? Don't
Mm.
like I
That's
said,
right.
yes. Did he have some bad ideas? Like many of the people of his time had bad ideas concerning black people and slavery. Absolutely, sure. No one's discounting that. Yet at the same time, he went to war to free people from slavery and to tell these people to go shove it because they were what they were doing is they were capturing soldiers and merchant ships and women and children and then holding them for ransom. And we were actually, as a country, we're paying them ransom, just kind of like, oh well, we won't do it if you pay us like a certain amount.
Right. It was
And Thomas
extortion.
Jefferson
Essentially, it
had
was
enough.
extortion.
Yeah, and Thomas Jefferson had enough. He's like, well, fuck this. When he became president, he's like, we're not paying these people. We're going to burn them to the ground. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it might be said that Thomas Jefferson had the first, was the originator of the shock and awe or fire and fury, battle strategy.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm really excited to dive more into this book. Um, and yeah, I might pick you up a copy, so maybe we can read it together and we'll talk
That is
about it.
greatly appreciated. All right. Moving on to the final bit of tonight's show, and that is our movie review. And surprise, surprise, we are actually reviewing a movie from this year,
Yeah, yeah.
and that is Avengers Endgame. The conclusion to 22 movies, a 22 movie series, a franchise over 11 years, and you know, uh, I'm gonna say it.
Spoilers ahead.
I know. I'm gonna say this right now. Spoilers ahead. So if you're probably like the 5 or 6 people left in California who haven't seen this movie, then just mute this part. But consider yourself fully warned.
All right, hey, are you done? Are the people that have not seen it gone away?
Yes. We
Okay,
just lost
good.
some. Okay, we just lost some viewers. Okay, perfect. Let's go. All right. So yes, Endgame is kind of the conclusion to last year's Infinity War, which was another great outing from Marvel Disney. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was great. Someone who has been a Marvel fan, pre Iron Man 2008, but because I was a fan of Marvel comics, but also as a fan of the MCU since Iron Man.
Yeah, as I stated, what was it last week? How I actually went through all the MCU films and watched them, all of them, outside of Captain Marvel, before watching Endgame this week. Um, I had to say, like I said, I appreciate the movies a lot more. They're a lot better than I initially thought. Like when you just watch them in theaters, but watching them all back to back to back to back was really, man. It's really good and how they all connect. I love that, and I'll be honest, I was not that I wasn't a Marvel fan because I do like comics, but outside of like Spider Man or the X Men, I didn't really know too much about some of the Marvel comics. I'm more of a DC guy. But after watching through the MCU films and honestly, they're using their third and fourth tier characters in the MCU.
That's right.
Uh, and the fact that they made it into what it is mind blowing. Because nobody knew who outside of like Marvel fans knew who the hell Iron Man was before it started. Outside of playing Marvel versus Capcom, I had no idea who the hell Iron Man was, or War Machine, or any of those guys.
Right. Yeah, you're right. These were uh, second and third string characters. I mean, particularly Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
Talk
that's
about
like fifth
something coming
almost.
out of left field. Nobody knew who
And
Star Lord was. Nobody knew who Gamora was. Nobody knew who Rocket the Raccoon was.
I have to say, I think Rocket Raccoon is now one of my favorite characters.
Me too.
Oh man, he's awesome.
I know.
Well, I'll say this because I love the smartass characters in comics,
Right.
and he's right up my alley.
Right. Oh, could you adjust your camera? You're a bit fuzzy.
I'm a bit fuzzy.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yeah. Just that. Yeah. It just got out of focus. But yeah. Even though, yeah, I do. Yeah, in terms of Guardians characters, Rocket Raccoon is my favorite. I think overall, my favorite character would be Captain America.
I'm still a Spider-Man guy. Like I
Mm.
think he's still my favorite Marvel character, but I definitely appreciate a lot more of them now.
Right, but more important. I mean, as much as I was a fan of Captain America before the movies, but these movies I think help me, help solidify more my choice in Captain America being my favorite.
Definitely, 100%.
Because I just because because I just loved like the arc that they gave him within the MCU. First being kind of like almost like the parody version of like the propaganda, you know, um, propaganda figure, and then in Winter Soldier turning him into someone who an absolute man or a moral man in a morally gray world, and
Yeah,
then in Civil War, making him like the full on like anti-establishment character to bring in to kind of almost within Infinity War and Endgame, making him again kind of like that symbol of hope to rally behind.
yeah. It was. I definitely have a bigger appreciation, at least for the MCU. Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they did a great job with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Iron Man of the MCU, I would have to say Iron Man's been my favorite. I love Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean, man, talk about inspired casting. Because originally they were gonna get Tom Cruise to be Tony Stark.
yeah,
Yeah. So
wow,
could you imagine? Yeah, could you
I
imagine an
think that would have been
MCU?
interesting too.
Yeah, imagine an MCU with Tom Cruise as Iron Man.
I think that would have been interesting too. By the way, I think he would have
Right.
done pretty good, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It would it would be just a little. It would just be different. But really, I mean, I think you know, Marvel got so lucky with Robert Downey Jr. And maybe I shouldn't say lucky because I know like his casting was thanks to Jon Favreau, the original director of the first Iron Man. Because he recognized the parallels of Tony Stark the character and Robert Downey Jr. the actor. Because
right,
both the characters were these kind of larger than life characters who also like struggled with like substance abuse,
right.
and, but then ultimately found like a sort of redemption.
Absolutely.
And so a bit of an inspired casting, on the part of Jon Favreau.
Yeah, no, I think Robert Downey Jr. I think portrayed Iron Man really well. Uh, definitely, definitely made me love Iron Man.
Hmm.
And I think I don't know if I said this. Maybe I said this last week, but I know I've said it to you where actually, it made me want to like go. It's like, well, damn, I didn't think I was gonna give a shit about Iron Man. Now let me go take a look at the comics and let me learn more about Iron Man and some of the stories behind that, and
Hmm.
I felt that a lot about like a lot of the characters.
Right. Yeah, because even like Thor, like who would have thought, like you know, Thor would be such an amazing character as well.
I never knew I was gonna give a goddamn about Thor either.
Right? Yeah, because it's like here's this Marvel character, but then he's also has his own kind his own thing in Norse mythology, but Stan Lee did his thing, and apparently he was a pretty popular character back in the day, but it's like and the worry was like how do you translate Thor from the comics into a movie, and I think they did an admirable job with it. Um, Admittedly, the first two aren't that spectacular, but I think in terms of setting up the character and like his like kind of backstory, I thought they were serviceable.
I think what makes them and because I'm gonna disagree a little bit in saying that like that they're not great films.
Mm-hmm.
I think what helps is watching it through the context of all like the movies and through the MCU. And when you do that, it I think it because I actually appreciated those films a lot better. This I've seen them now like what like 3 or 4 times, but it's like watching it throughout the whole context of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Damn,
Okay, fair enough.
I think they're better than people give them credit for. Same thing with Iron Man 3. I know some people didn't like that one.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
actually
no, I definitely have an appreciation for Iron Man 3 that is not shared by a lot of people.
because
But
you because the thing is why those movies you kind of need those movies because you start to see the character development of like Thor and the character development of Tony Stark slash Iron Man and when they get to the next movies of like the Avengers or the next part you see why they do what they do because it had you if you don't watch Iron Man 3 and you jump to Winter Soldier for in essence Tony Stark kind of just out of nowhere kind of changes his how he views things and it's like
mm,
but if you see all of them together you see how why he kind of goes the direction he does and kind of why he signs the Sokovia Accords and why he even brings it to the table to the rest of the Avengers, and vice versa with Captain America. If you don't watch his films and like how his character develops, it doesn't make sense of why he's like, there's no way in hell I'm going to sign this, and
right.
why he defects. And I
Hmm.
think that's why these movies were. Some will say it's like, oh, it's just for kids and it's just comic books and it's stupid. And it's like they're actually a lot more complex and they have there's a lot of complexity and interesting thought discussions that can be had about the films. Do I think these films are like the best films of all time? No. But do I think they're good films and have rewatchability? Absolutely.
Yeah. Kind of backtracking to Civil War, that last fight between Iron Man and Captain America, that is just like if that doesn't like make your heart wrench a little bit, you should check your pulse because there was no victory in that fight, and even
No.
and there was that part where like Iron Man is like I mean Captain America is just like pounding on Iron Man, and like he grabs his shield, like he smashes his helmet off, and then he raises it up, raises the shield up, and Tony Stark like has like this real dread that that Captain America's gonna kill him, and he raises his arm to block him, but and he comes down only to show that he just like cracks his arc reactor to just stop him. But like there, you
Yeah.
kind of share that dread in Tony Stark, and it's like, oh my god, this guy's gonna kill me,
Right.
right? And it
And
like
the whole conversation that Black Panther has with the actual villain of that film,
yeah,
and it's
Zemo,
like, yeah, and it was mainly about creating dissension among the Avengers, and it's like, it's like you did not win. It's like, didn't I?
right? Yeah, because like his whole thing was like, yeah, I could I could attack them, and I could and I could have I could have brought them down, but they would have just got they would have just rebuilt and come at me stronger. But if I make them fight amongst them, if I make them destroy themselves, then I win.
Yeah, and you could argue that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. But then but then back to that fact, like at the end, like when Captain America's walking away with Bucky, you know, in almost like in a childish manner, Tony Stark's spits out like it's like you don't deserve that shield. It's like my father made that shield, and it's like this. These aren't the words of a a victorious man. This is kind of like the last throw of of desperation. This is the last like kind of punch that someone throws in desperation. But and you can see that in Captain America, he knows who he is. He knows he's Captain America with or without that shield, and that's why that's why he was able to drop it and walk away, because he knows that being Captain America isn't just about the shield. It's about it's about the person that wields it,
Yeah,
and like that kind of symbolism, that kind of depth, like from a from a comic book movie, from a superhero movie,
it was. Yeah, it was a gut wrenching movie actually.
right? Yeah. And some might say like it was undone by the subsequent scene where Tony gets the package, and it's like the burner phone and like the note from Cap, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't the burner phone. That was after whatchamacallit? That was after Civil War.
Well, that was at the end of Civil War.
Right.
It was like
But
it
like
was
I
like one
said,
of the last scenes.
yeah, but that doesn't make Winter Soldier any like less of a film. I think it still makes that a really powerful one.
Right. Right. Anyway, well,
Um,
back to Endgame. Um,
I think this was a perfect ending to the this phase, or like the was it this is the end of phase 3, and it was a kind of a fitting ending to some of the characters,
mhm.
at least with the as far as the iteration of like with those particular actors, um, and obviously the idea behind it was they are trying to get back at Thanos and try to recover the people that were lost. And initially, it looks like as if that's not going to happen, because when they do find him, he had because they saw him snap his fingers again, thinking that he took out another half of another planet or
Or
something
yeah, or
like
he did
that.
some, or yeah, he just did, or he did something else. Interestingly enough, mostly every scene in like the initial couple of trailers, they're all from like the first like 20 minutes of the movie.
Right.
And so, like amazingly, the Russos did not give up anything about this movie, and so kudos to them. I mean, later on, like the third or fourth trailer, you get a little bit more, but nothing is really spoiled. And so
Yeah, I usually like try to stay away from after like like the first trailer. I try to stay away from stuff.
mhm,
And so yeah, that none of that was ruined for me.
right.
But
But I
like
think like the Russos, they have like this reputation of putting in like or creating shots that they know they're not going to use, but it's just for the trailer.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, like their level of secrecy is like beyond that of any like NSA agent.
yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, but again, I'm again agree with Robert. This was a satisfying end to or satisfying such a satisfying conclusion for all the characters. Um,
But the reason like what I liked, the reason why I really liked it was because the whole premise was to he was trying to like undo what Thanos had done as far as to bring the people back.
uh-huh.
And the thinking was that like they could recover the stones and maybe like recover everyone that was lost. All the Asgardians that were killed, like Loki
Well,
and
at
all
least
those
the ones
guys.
that they were dusted. Oh no, no, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the ones that
That
were
was the
dusted.
later plan. You're right.
But I'm saying like it was like a way for them to like we're gonna get everybody back. And the realization when they do find Thanos is that he actually destroyed the stones. He destroy
Yeah,
snapped them out of
he snapped
existence.
again, but it was just for the stones, and like yeah, that heartbreaking reveal because initially they all like kind of ambush him and grab him, and Thor like chops off his arm, and then Rocket looks at the gauntlet and it's like there's no stones here, and it's like and the reason why he destroyed them, he said that because of temptation. And so
And
with that you understand that this wasn't like some megalomaniacal plan to hold on to or retain power for Thanos. This was a mission. This was like a
he
life's purpose.
believed in
This was
his
a life's
mission.
purpose.
Yeah.
There was
Which
no ego involved in this. He thought he was doing something moral. Um,
and that's I think that's even that's the scary part of it is he thought he was doing something that was right.
mhm. Right, but then like and also
Um,
and then you have like that kind of like soul crushing beheading of Thanos by Thor, which by no means was a victory. Like when he chopped it off, I think everyone in the theater felt like that wasn't a victory.
there was
That
no
was just
victory in
there was
that.
no victory in
Yeah.
that.
Um, and then it's like, well, and then obviously like there's the screen like 5 years later. So
Right,
they dealt all of those guys dealt with that pain um, in their own way. Some more successfully than others, and
right, because you have Cap running like a counseling group, a survivors group to help people move on and kind of mirroring what Sam did in Winter Soldier when he held that support group for like the veterans.
right.
But like yeah, like and then you see kind of Black Widow take a kind of leadership role back at Avengers HQ, and she's like they have like the debrief with all the other like Avengers like with the Guardians, Nebula, and Rocket, and then you have Captain Marvel and Rhodey, and I forget.
The general from
Yeah, the general from
Right.
Black Panther,
Yeah,
Okoye, I believe.
I think that was her name. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
know.
yeah,
I the funny thing is I know that actress's name because she's in The Walking. I don't remember her name, the name of her character in the movie.
what is her actual name?
Danai Gurira.
Oh, okay. Wait, does she actually have that accent in real life, or
No, she doesn't.
okay? Just checking. I didn't think she did because I know because I've seen a couple episodes of Walking Dead and I don't remember her having that kind of accent. Um,
Yeah, I don't think she has that accent in real life. So
right. Yeah, kind of like Chadwick Boseman. You know, he doesn't have that accent either.
yeah,
But I think he pulls it off pretty well.
yeah. I think he's a great Black Panther, actually.
Yeah. Um, right, and then you see,
But
yeah, you
anyway,
see that, yeah, like how you were saying how you know a lot of people have moved on, some more successfully than others. One being Tony, and you know him and Pepper settling down and you know starting a family. They have a daughter, which they kind of alluded, or which you know they kind of spoiled the name in Infinity War, Morgan, and he's by all intents and purposes has moved on. And Bruce Banner Hulk has also moved on a bit in that you know he's finally resolved the different parts of himself and now is the
him and Hulk are one.
right, yeah, like they're like Hulk's body but mostly Banner's personality and intellect, which I think was borrowed from the comic books when Hulk became Professor Hulk. You know when he,
That's
you know,
that's right.
yeah, because in the comic books, you know, they do something similar where Banner and Hulk they somehow reconcile with themselves, and you know, and Hulk is like smart.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, but the one who I think took it the hardest, as far as like for the failure, was Thor, who just
Yeah.
man,
Well, I
like
mean,
you can see like where
actually, I think he's like one of the hardest because one, he you know he definitely has like that one survivor's guilt and also regret because even in Infinity War, you know, Thanos kind of mocks him and said like, "Oh, you should have gone for the head." And you know, because of his failure, you know, the snap was able to still happen. And yeah, Thor ends up becoming this fat, bearded schlub, you know, schlub of former like a very fat shadow of himself.
yeah. I mean, you could also argue that like Hawkeye kind of goes
Right.
through
Yeah.
like
That's what
a
I was alluding to. As you know, as Thor being one of the event, you know, being one of the Avengers that took it the hardest, and you know, Hawkeye being the other because you know you see in uh, the opening of the movie where you know he's having like this nice day with his family. You know, he has the ankle monitor strapped to his leg, and he's giving you know archery lessons to his daughter. And you know they're just having a nice picnic on their farm, and all of a sudden, like the daughter disappears, and then he turns around, and then his wife and two sons are gone, and he just you know, and then he you know he I think he spirals, and then he becomes inconsolable, and then he becomes the Ronin persona that was in the comic books, where he becomes like just like this killer.
yeah.
And that's actually one of the things. That's actually one of the things that they were discussing in the holographic debrief with the other Avengers. Rhodey goes to Mexico City, where you know where Barton is rumored to have been seen, and then you know when Rhodey wrote War Machine gets there, it's like a bloodbath. I mean, they don't show it to us, but it's described to us as something very graphic, and you know as something that you know Clint would have to you know kind of pay for with you know more jail time.
Right. The what the, so what really saves the day is uh if you never watched Ant-Man and the Wasp, what we forget is that Scott Lang, Ant-Man, when they are kind of doing more research into the quantum realm,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the other three of his group, Dr. Pym, um, Janet Pym and Hope Van Dyne, they are Thanos into
Yeah, they're
non-existence.
like when he's in the quantum realm, they get dusted, and so he is trapped within the quantum realm, and and then a little bit of space time manipulation, and when he comes out, to him only 5 hours have gone by, but for everyone else 5 years have gone by. Um, and one of the first things
And
that he does is he happens upon this giant memorial for all the people that got dusted, and his first thoughts were of his daughter, so he goes and runs and he tries to look for her name, but it wasn't there, but he finds his name there. And I guess people thought that he got dusted back then.
right,
uh, but I thought
and
it was pretty
what I
funny
think what's
that that a rat crawling over the control panels is what uh, releases him. Um,
right.
and it's funny, and a YouTuber was saying like, "Oh, that wasn't any ordinary rat. That was a sentient rat. I smell Marvel's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover."
Oh, that'd be interesting. Um, but what ended up happening is that he goes and he sees his daughter and sees how much time has he actually realizes how much time has passed,
Right.
and from there he goes and tries to find what's left of the Avengers, and
Mm-hmm.
it's through that it's like, well, I think we might be able to manipulate the quantum realm to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like how they end up how the movie kind of like gets going, and what they obviously they go to try to find Tony, who would be the guy to talk to about it.
Right.
He initially declines, and they start doing experiments anyway with Bruce Banner. um, but then they gave Tony the itch to solve it,
Right.
and he goes and he solves the issue and like finds ways like, yeah, it's doable, we can do this. And that's kind of where the movie really gets going, and they jump through time to pick out those Infinity Stones. uh but what we realize that is that they're not going to be able to bring everybody back, but the ones that were snapped out of existence by Thanos, they can get those guys back. So
Mm-hmm.
guys that were in the first part of Infinity War, like on the Asgardian ship, they're those guys that were killed, like
Right. The ones that were like
Loki.
stabbed and killed, like Heimdall, and
Yeah,
Loki, they're gone.
right. And so there's that. And the thing is, like, so I think that to me the most heartbreaking scene, or what was really tough, was the when they go to get the Soul Stone, when Black Hawkeye and Black Widow go to get the Soul Stone, and the fact that that getting that particular stone does require a sacrifice of something that you care about, like the ultimate sacrifice. And they're essentially like, it kind of a little bit, it kind of reminded me of Spartacus, like where they're fighting to the death and one person dies and the other person gets crucified to death. It's kind of like there's no real good like option.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, um, they're all, they're both, they're, at the precipice, and they're both kind of, talking and working things out. It's like, oh yeah, there's only one, there's only one choice for this. Like, yeah, you're right, only one choice. And they slowly start to realize that they're talking about themselves, and
Themselves.
not each other. And so like this kind of like this almost like, what is it? How to describe
I
it?
think part of it I think part of it is because Hawkeye believed that with all the killing that he had done over the past 5 years, that he deserved to die.
Right.
Whereas Black Widow is like, I, I don't have anybody else. You have a family that might come back because of this,
Right.
and it's
Well,
like, and
she definitely, I mean, given the 5 year time jump, she definitely starts to identify the Avengers as her family, and she's like, and I think she's like, I think just let me do this for my family,
right.
because like you were saying, like she has nobody else, and so,
And it's and
but
her,
then it's like,
and this is also like goes back to like watching the other movies where she talks about like how she wants to, I think it was in Age of Ultron, like getting rid of the red in her ledger.
oh no, that was the
uh
first Avengers,
the first Avengers. Oh yeah,
yeah,
okay, that's right.
right,
um
yeah, and there's always this allusion to this dark past, like
which
you said in
we
event.
never got a Black Widow movie, so we
I
don't really know
mean,
the full backstory.
rumor has it that we are gonna get Black Widow movies, but they're probably gonna be uh pre Endgame, or
Right.
probably even like pre Avengers, pre Iron Man even.
Yeah, keep talking, I'll be
Yeah,
right
because
back.
like yeah, okay, yeah. So like Robert was saying, there was always this illusion of wrongdoing in Black Widow's life. I mean, we kind of see that when she has the hallucination in Age of Ultron about her, the Red School, or the Widow program, where they take girls and they train them in like ballet, and in combat, and and guns, uh, and then you kind of get and then also in Avengers, when when she's interrogating Loki, and Loki says like, "Oh, Barton told me everything." The hospital fire in uh, some city in some South American country, Buenos Aires. Yes, that's right. The hospital fire in Buenos Aires, and and so Black Widow does have a past, and and she figures that this is the opportunity to make up for that. And so like there's like this really odd scramble by both of them to throw themselves off this ledge, um, like how Thanos threw Gamora off the ledge in Infinity War. But they try to stop each other. Uh, Widow like throws like an electrifying disc at Barton. Barton recovers, and shoots an exploding arrow to like push her back, but you know but ultimately it comes down to um, they both kind of go over the edge, and Widow uses like her grappler to hold Barton to the ledge, and he's holding onto her arm, and she just kind of like forces him to let go, and then she falls, and then the two spires begin to glow, and then you find Barton back at the beginning with Soul Stone in hand. Um, uh,
It was just like, understanding the sacrifice that had to have been made to get that.
right,
uh it was That was a rough scene.
right, and and then you have and then yeah, 'cause you have all the other Avengers standing around, and Hulk, Professor Hulk even like grabs the bench and like chucks it into the lake. And and then you have Captain America promising like, oh, her death won't be in vain. we're gonna get them all back. And well, we kind of skipped over the well, not skipped over, but let's kind of backtrack here and talk about when they went after the space stone, the time stone, and the mind stone, which was again, which they all figured out as to being, all three of those stones were in New York during the invasion back in Avengers
Right.
1. And so, Captain America, Ant Man, Iron Man, and Hulk all go back to that time, and they concoct this plan to get the Tesseract and the Scepter away from their past selves, and also Shield, otherwise, but also Hydra. And one of the funniest
Yeah.
scenes I think was when Captain America goes into the
The
elevator.
elevator scene.
Yeah, the elevator scene, surrounded by Shield agents, but they're really Hydra agents. One, Jasper Sitwell, and then Crossbones Rumlow, and
Yep.
kind of mirroring the elevator scene in Winter Soldier.
Right.
Him being surrounded by all those agents, and he says like, oh, Director Pierce has sent me to get the scepter from you guys, and to bring it to him directly. And it's like, oh, well, I didn't get any um, orders like that or something. And you think that it's going to be a repeat of Winter Soldier, but Steve Rogers goes up to Jasper Sitwell, up to Jasper Sitwell, and whispers, "Hail Hydra!"
Yeah,
And
it's like,
then
oh, okay.
and then they're like, "Oh, okay," and so they let him go.
I like that too. I was like,
which I
it's
think
like
which
he
I think is a
lightened up.
great redemption of what they kind of did in the comic books with the Fallen Kingdom run of Captain America, where they turned Captain America into a brainwashed Hydra agent.
Yeah.
But this one, like, they subverted it, and they made it a ploy. It's like, and it was so great. It was so satisfying.
Yeah, it was a very, very satisfying scene. And then yeah, what they sent Hulk to get the time stone from the Ancient One.
Yeah, or at least they think that it's Doctor Strange, but it turns out to be the Ancient One, and they have this conversation about like, oh, you can't take the stones because if you take the stones from the past and you create like these offshoots or
Diverse time.
alternative timelines, and and so the Ancient One is reluctant to give up the Time Stone initially until Banner tells her, it's like, well, Stephen Strange gave up the Time Stone in the future, and she's like, what? And so like, but because she even said in Doctor Strange that he was the best of them, that she knew that he did it for a reason, and so she gives Banner the Time Stone. But then also makes promises and makes him promise to return the stones after they've all been used.
Yeah. So there was that. Then there was the Iron Man and Ant Man were trying to get back the Tesseract, which they end up losing, and then have to go further back in time to the 70s to grab that.
Right. And then which you have just really quickly, they do the way they lose the Tesseract back then from Avengers is that Tony had the Tesseract in hand, but back up at the penthouse, um, you know, uh, like they all like cram into an elevator, and then Hulk tries to go in, and then Stark sends us like, whoa, 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 weight limit, take the stairs. And so, kind of like annoyed that he had to take the stairs, Hulk comes crashing through. He's like, Hulk hates stairs, and like crashes through the door, and then which knocks Tony back and knocks the briefcase holding the Tesseract open, and then at the feet at Loki, and Loki is able to grab it and use it and teleport himself away out, which does present an interesting little hiccup because
that he
you know
might come back at some point.
yeah, now there's a offshoot where it's kind of like the Schrodinger's cat thing, where because Loki did die, but now there's another alternative timeline where he lives. So
Right.
he's both dead and alive.
Yeah, that's true. So he
Yeah,
may come back.
yeah, he may come
The god
back,
of mischief. The god of mischief rules.
right? Yeah. Well, after they lose the Tesseract, then they think about it and like when was the Tesseract also around? And they realized back in like the 1970s. And so Tony and Steve, they because they were also running out of PIM, since they only had enough PIM particles for a round trip to get to their time destination and then back to the present. Um, they also had to figure out where they can get more PIM particles, and it's like the old Shield base on the Army base that Captain America was trained on, and so they go back
Yep.
to that time, and Tony retrieves the Tesseract, the Space Stone, but not before bumping into his father.
Yeah.
And they have like this really great scene where they kind of relate to each other. It's like and he tells them that his name is Howard Potts. Howard because that's his dad's name, and then Potts because of Pepper. Um, and then they're just kind of relating to each other. It's like because Tony hasn't been born yet, but his dad is saying like, oh, I wonder if I'm gonna be a good dad, or and then he relates to his dad by saying like, well, yeah, I have a kid, I it's terrifying, but it's great, it's gonna be great. And
Yeah,
then
that was a really touching scene.
yeah, it was a very touching scene. And then Steve has kind of a reunion of sorts with Peggy when he goes to retrieve the PIM particles, and some people, one of the personnel is kind of suspicious of him, so they call up MPs, and then he like is kind of forced into go into this office, and then he goes into this office and he sees Peggy Carter, and he's all struck with the feels, and he's able to have like this moment with her, but not actually being able to interact with her though.
Yeah, and that was tough. And then the other what they sent, um, there was crap. Oh, they sent Thor and Rocket to retrieve the one of the stones
Yeah, the reality
from
stone.
yeah, the Reality Stone.
Yeah, and then like
And
the last time that they knew where it was on Asgard in Jane Foster
yep,
from
and
Thor: The Dark World.
that was kind of a really touching scene too, where Thor reconnects with his mom,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it
and
was like great because like the mom like he was trying to play it off like he was still Thor from that time, but I mean anyone with eyeballs could see that it was different, but his mom extra doubly knew that it wasn't him from that time.
I think the other thing that was kind of like with Thor was you could tell like he still had a lot of trouble dealing with everything that had happened,
Right.
and so as he was not the Thor that we all have known up to this point. There was a lot of doubt and fear and anxiety
Mm-hmm.
that he was dealing with. And Rocket is kind of just like, "Come on, Thor, stop being a pussy and let's do this thing." And he wasn't like the leader of the Avengers that we all know and love. and I think what changed him was having that conversation with his mom, and then when after they got the stone, he kind of like reached out his hand, and the fact that his hammer came back to him,
Right.
showing
Yeah.
him
It's
that
like,
he's
yeah.
still worthy of leadership in he was like, I think that gave him the confidence that he needed.
Right. Yeah. It's just like because even though he was fat, he was like, oh, I'm still worthy. Yes.
Yeah.
So which I'm sure I'm sure gave him a big boost of confidence. Funny thing was when Rocket was being chased and the Asgardian guards shouted out, he's like, come back here, Rabbit,
Yeah.
which is like,
uh,
it's like, wow, do Asgardian rabbits look like raccoons?
that good question. Uh, the other thing that was the other kind of funny thing is when they were getting, what was the Power Stone? Was that the one that was in Guardians of the Galaxy that
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
first
yeah.
one?
Mm-hmm.
It when they went to go get the Power Stone, they were it was Nebula and War Machine. They go to retrieve that one, and it was that very first scene in Guardians of the Galaxy where Star Lord is
Yeah,
trying
he's
to get
dancing
that.
to Redbone, "Come and Get Your Love." But
Yeah, and
it's
so
seen
it starts.
from like the outside perspective, so you don't hear the music. Only it's only a Star Lord that can hear the music, and so you just see like this. You just see him kind of dancing around.
And it's like, and War Machine is like, is he always this stupid? It's like, yes.
Like pretty much, yeah. And so
I thought it was great seeing that scene again, but from like the outside perspective.
right, yeah. And then
Oh,
but
that was great.
so they were able to get the Power Stone, but not without a hiccup because for some reason Nebula's
She's a cyborg.
yeah, she's a cyborg, so she has like these these cybernetic parts which somehow link to her past self, which
Yeah,
which then kind of uh, alerted Thanos of what was to come of the future. And so kind of like Trojan horse style, they switch nebulas. So oh, and since the 5 years since the snap, Nebula got a fresh orange head skull plate put in,
yeah.
which differentiated herself from the past Nebula. And so, to disguise herself, past Nebula takes that orange piece and puts it into her own head, and kind of does double, kind of plays double agent um, on her end, and so when they get back, they assemble the Infinity Stones into a gauntlet that Tony makes, and they all discuss like who's gonna do the snap, and Thor kind of volunteers, and everyone's just kind of like, nah, bro, you're not up for this. And then it's revealed that the radiation that's given off from the Infinity Stones is gamma radiation, and so
Which the only one that can do that is the Hulk.
yeah, or the person who's most likely to survive then is the Hulk, because of obviously of his exposure to gamma radiation. And so
So technically, you could argue that Captain America could have done that too, because that's technically how he became Captain America. Because the Hulk became the Hulk because they were trying to recreate the whole
right, right. Well,
Steve
at
Rogers.
least in the MCU, yes. Um, they're in the MCU, like the reason why Hulk becomes the Hulk is because they're trying to recreate, Dr. Erskine's formula and process for turning, Steve into a super soldier, and they were, and then in Captain America, the first Avenger, he says that he's going to bombard him with Vita rays. Um, and people didn't know exactly what Vita rays were, and so they did experiments, and Bruce Banner postulated that maybe Vita rays are gamma rays, and so like with a variation of the super soldier formula, he then exposes himself to gamma radiation, which then subsequently turns him into the Hulk.
Yeah, but anyways, but I digress.
Yeah, but
But
we
they
digress.
realize that or Bruce realizes that he's the only one that can really do it, and so he ends up taking on the uh, the new Infinity Gauntlet, um, and he
And
does the snap, and
right.
then it's just
But
there.
very specifically, it was agreed upon that they wouldn't try to undo the first snap, and reset time, but they would just bring back the people that were snapped away.
Yeah, and they realized that doing anything else would destroy like the time space continuum.
Yeah, or make things worse.
Right.
And so he does that, and then like kind of like a sign to that, you then hear a bird, which is funny because it does, because like the whole purpose of the snap was to snap away half of the population of the universe, and that includes like all living things. So
Right.
birds, plants, animals, what have you.
Right.
So
And
not just people. And so and then so immediately after you kind of you hear these birds chirping, and then the secondary clue is comes when Hawkeye's phone rings, and then it's his wife Laura.
so it's like, oh, and it's like, and then they realize it worked,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, because then that's when past Nebula springs into action and brings past Thanos to the present,
Yeah.
which comes at a very like kind of convenient way. But we'll maybe get into that a little bit later. But anyways, Thanos' ship comes through the quantum realm and out into the present, and he immediately bombs Avengers headquarters, and then he bombs the crap out of it, and then some of the Avengers are trapped far underground. Rocket, War Machine, and Hulk are trapped under this rubble. And Hulk is holding up the rubble, and then Ant Man is he to save himself he goes micro, and he's just like kind of like floating around the debris, and then Hawkeye survives, and he has the gauntlet, but then all of a sudden you hear like Outriders, those black and gold like beast things from Infinity War, and then he then proceeds to book it, and I don't know. You've seen it more recently than I do.
So from there, it's like the battle begins, and obviously, like Thanos is trying to regather the gauntlet and to kind of uh, do what he had been planning to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of like where the final battle is based off of that,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, so it's kind of like it's mainly initially it's Iron Man, Thor, Captain America that fight Thanos, and they end up like they're starting to lose.
Right. It's crazy because this is Thanos without the gauntlet, and he's still like holding his own against three of the Avengers,
Right,
arguably three of the most powerful.
and that's when the those that were lost come back,
Right. Well,
So
first, like,
Doctor
yeah, they get
Strange.
the crap kicked out of them, and um, and Captain America's shield is gets broken by Thanos, and but not before craziest of crazy things happen. Captain America wields Mjolnir.
Yeah, and which you kind of see allusion to that in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Right. And it's funny because then like Thor lets out this "I knew it,"
Yeah.
kind of hinting that he knew from Age of Ultron because maybe like when he moved it, he Captain America could have lifted it back then, but to kind of like spare Thor's feelings, he didn't lift it.
Maybe.
I
Uh,
mean that's one possibility because I mean like if he was able to like make it like budge a little bit, then arguably he probably could have lifted it.
it's very very possible.
Right? Because if it just like, because it wouldn't just like, because if he really wasn't worthy back then, and he wouldn't even able to like kind of like make it squeak, you know?
Right.
Because like the squeak comes from when like because when the surface of the hammer and the surface of the glass table like kind of come into friction, and so like that wouldn't have even able to been happen if he wasn't able to lift it.
The so there was that, and then all the other Avengers make their return.
Right,
Uh,
via Doctor Strange like sling ring portals, and it's great because like you hear over the you hear Sam's voice over the comms, and he's like Cap, you there? He's like on your left, and then all of a sudden like the portal will open and he comes flying through, and it's a great payoff to like of course Winter Soldier when in the opening scenes where they're like running and Captain America is obviously outpacing Sam, and every time he does he's on the left, so he as he runs by he goes on your left.
yeah, I
And so
forgot about that, but yeah, you're right. That may so there's just like all these like kind of like great payoffs, and there's a lot of just this these great reunions that happen, and I'll be honest, I teared up a little bit just because there's a few that were just really, man, it was kind of heartwarming.
right? I mean, there was a bunch of times I teared up. There's like the when Scott sees his daughter after 5 years, and what is it like when Thor talked to his mom, and then I got choked up when Tony talked to his dad.
Yeah,
You know,
and even when Tony and Peter Parker reunite.
yes, oh man, that was God. Oh man, that gave me chills.
But
What is
the
it?
so then yeah, obviously then the battle is for the gauntlet.
Right. Oh, and
And
then like after like, cause like everyone comes, like freaking like the Wakandans come, the wizards from the wizard school come, and even like the
everybody,
Ravengers from Guardians of the Galaxy come
they're there
for this,
too.
yeah, for this final battle, and the payoff of payoffs. Captain America, stands in front of his army, and he's like, and he cries out, "Avengers assemble!"
Yes.
And it's like, oh yeah, because we were kind of teased that at the end of Age of Ultron, where he gets a new team assembled, and he's says Avengers, but it cuts off right when he's about to say assemble.
Yeah, and it's like just finally with that payoff too. It's like, man, you just get like the chills. Like, oh man, like it's just such an exciting. Like it's the climax of the film,
Hmm.
and it's like Thanos nearly gets the gauntlet, and it
Right. There's
holds
like
it in
this.
his hand. Um,
Yeah. There's like this
but
kind of game of like football or keep away where first Clint has it, and then Black Panther shows up, and it's like Clint, give me the gauntlet,
yeah, then
like give
Spider
it
Man
to
takes
me.
it.
And then he like takes it, he takes it, and then Spider Man comes and he grabs it, and then
The here now, okay, here's one of my few like uh parts of the movie that I cause I don't like Captain Marvel. I don't like Brie Larson. I think just I don't know
Yeah,
something
I know.
about
I know. I know what you're talking about.
but there's this scene where Spider-Man nearly like gets taken out, and not that like I said, I there's nothing against like female characters and the MCU because I actually do like a lot of them,
Hmm.
but that scene where like they're all like protecting Spider-Man, but it's only the female characters that are.
Yeah,
It's like
I know.
that
I
was
know.
that to me was like a statement of some sort.
Oh, really? You don't say.
That was like really like it couldn't have been like a mixture of like all the some of all the characters that could
Right.
have
Yeah.
like
Not even like the premier characters. Like maybe some of like Mbaku or or Wong or
yeah, I don't need it to be all the
or
premier characters, but like it was
or
specifically only
Kraglin.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like so happened to be all the women, and like where were these? Like were they just like really that close around? No one was like scattered throughout the field. That they
Yeah.
weren't that separated that that they could all come at this one time to be like girl power and like help Peter Park Spider Man.
I will say that's the only time I kind of like yeah, it's like in the movie.
Right.
Uh
No, I
but
get it. I get it.
yeah,
I get it.
yeah, but ultimately like I said, I like those characters. I just saying that it's like come
Yeah,
on.
Valkyrie, cool ass character. Wasp, cool ass character.
Well, they never really developed like Pepper with her like Iron Man
Oh
like
yeah, that was another weird. That was a weird kind of jarring thing because you never seen her like. I mean, outside of Iron Man
outside of Iron
3,
Man
where she
3.
uses the repulsor blaster. That's about the one time you really see her in like in armor. So it's like to have her there and then all of a sudden be like really proficient in using the armor. That was kind of weird.
Because we were never really like given any of that like of her
Right. There's
ever
like
like
no
fighting,
scene where like she's with like her daughter and like you know, and like the daughter's like wearing the helmet again, and then she takes she grabs the helmet from her daughter and goes to go put it back onto the armor, and then like the daughter could say like it's like oh mommy why don't you ever wear what daddy made you, and then she kind of like kind of looks at the daughter and then looks at the armor and it's like kind of like that. I think maybe what's if there's because she knows like what kind of mission that they're on. So like maybe it's time for maybe it's time for me to suit up and get some practice or something something to allude that she's gonna do something with the suit,
right?
like get in some like training with the suit.
But yeah, so like there's like I said, I like the majority of those characters. Just it was an odd scene. I think it
Yeah.
was kind of out of place.
Mhm.
But the what ends up happening is Iron Man finally gets a hold of the gauntlet and essentially makes the ultimate sacrifice to
Right.
eliminate Thanos and
Right.
his
Well, there's like a little bit of a misdirect because the gauntlet does end up falling at Thanos' feet, and he's able to like get it on, and he's about to snap, and he then mirrors his future self because in the beginning he does say like oh I'm Thanos future Thanos says like oh I'm inevitable, and and then past Thanos that comes to the future, says the same thing just as about as he's about to snap, but he snaps, but nothing happens, and then it's revealed that during like their skirmish, Iron Man was able to take a take away the uh, Infinity Stones and put it onto his suit, onto his glove, and and kind of in like full circle moment, he's about to snap, and to kind of counter what Thanos says when he says "I'm inevitable," he says "I am Iron Man," and boom.
and snaps them away into Thanos and his minions into non-existence.
Right. It's very interesting because another YouTuber who reviewed it, Endgame, pointed out that there was a lot of similarity. Some of the things that happened to the in Infinity War happened to Thanos' forces. Like one, like Ebony Maw comes like kind of like the Peter Parker is like, oh, I don't feel good. He kind of walks towards Thanos. Kind of like reaching out to him. And then you also have uh, Proxima Midnight, that crazy horn chick with like the blue, like the crazy
Yeah,
blue mascara, and who's that guy with like the blade? I don't know, but apparently like them two are married, and so like you have like this kind of mirror of Wanda and Vision when at the end of Infinity War, Wanda like throws her head back and like lets it happen.
yeah,
So you kind of have a lot of like parallels to what happened to the Avengers in Infinity War, and then what happens to Thanos' forces in Endgame. And there's like this really great exchange between Scarlet Witch and Thanos, which is it kind of breaks your heart too. But she's when after she is snapped back, she confronts him and says, "You took everything from me," and then
he's like,
because
I
this
don't
is
even
the
heart.
past Thanos, he's like, "I don't even know who you are."
And that just pissed her off even more.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, and of course, Tony makes the ultimate sacrifice, and because he's just a mere man, he can't take the radiation, and he ends up dying, and him and Peter have like that last moment, almost like the last moment, and then Pepper comes and like and tells him like, oh, you can rest now.
Yeah, and yeah, it was such a like you've been saying, it's like it was a fitting end to the whole thing, and I think the other like really touching moment was the fact because they had to return the Infinity Stones to their respective time periods, and so Captain America is the one that goes and does that, and they're like, for him he has as much time as he needs, but for us it's going to be like for that the rest of them it should only be like 5 seconds, and then but he doesn't come back, and all of a sudden like they look over and there's someone sitting on a bench.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, what I thought was that with where he was sitting and like how he was sitting, I thought maybe he had like reverted back to his pre super
Oh, pre
soldier self.
serum, yeah, pre serum self.
That's initially what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out like he had become an old man, and he's like, I decided to do some living that Tony always told me I should go and do,
Right.
and he it turns out that he had gone back and lived danced and lived his life with Peggy Carter as he had always wanted, and because I think like every movie he was in, he would constantly look at that pocket watch with the picture of Peggy in it,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's true. Yeah, because it was in the first Avengers. Or no, yeah, it was in his first movie, Captain America: First Avenger, and it was also in Winter Soldier.
yeah,
Did he do it in Civil War?
I think so.
I can't remember.
I could,
I can't remember him taking. I can't remember him. I don't remember him taking it out. But I know like
but
he
they
was a
allude to it
pallbearer
many
at her
times.
funeral.
Yeah, and which is kind of like because they did like allude to like him and like her niece that was also part of Shield.
Right.
Like they alluded like they had a relationship, but even then it still wasn't satisfying for him.
Right. Yeah, that must have been hella awkward when he was living his life and he was holding Sharon in his arms.
It's like I make out with you later in life.
Yeah, yeah, that's a little weird. Um,
Uh,
it's like yeah, it's like like he's like holding her. It's like, oh, I'm gonna make out with you one day. Ooh,
and he essentially end up giving the Captain America mantle to Sam.
yeah, Falcon. Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I know a lot of people was like, oh, why didn't you give it to Bucky? But
I don't think Bucky wanted it. I
well also for most of the 20th century and parts of the 21st century he was known as a terrorist.
yeah,
So how are
exactly.
you gonna pass
I
off? It's like making Osama bin Laden the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
right, but I actually agree that like Sam was the right choice to be Captain America.
Hmm.
Um, to pass on that mantle. Um,
Yeah, I think
and yeah,
Sam represents the best aspects of what it means to be Captain America.
right, and I like I said, he's the fitting choice. Yeah, I felt like that was perfect.
Right.
Um, and the other kind of like was thing was Thor gave up being king of Asgard or New Asgard as it
Yeah.
was
Or
to
King of the Asgardians,
yeah, and he
which
ended up moving on with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
right, yeah, which is funny because like he gets like a kind of like a cheese like, oh, the Asgardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, yeah. I thought, and honestly, like I would love to see that, like the new Guardians of the Galaxy, if like him as Thor was with
Mhm.
them. I think that'd be great. Um,
Yeah, although yeah,
like I
as
said,
great as that
I know
scene
the whole
was,
like contractual stuff, and like we may not see him again, but I know there is going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy 3,
right?
and I kind of hope that maybe we'll see him in that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, it might just be a cameo, but still might. I think I still enjoy that. My only gripe about Thor was that I think that scene where he gives up being king of Asgard and gives the throne over to Valkyrie, it undoes everything that happened to him, the character growth that happens to him in Ragnarok.
Yeah, I think
Because
so.
his ultimate uh, kind of like his ultimate destiny was to become a good king, and and his father recognized that he wasn't ready yet, and but at the end of Ragnarok, I think he was ready to be king, or he was ready to resign himself to be king. But with the events of Endgame, he kind of does like this kind of altruism thing where it's like, so oh, it's time to stop being what I'm supposed to be and just be who I am. I I didn't like that because again, I think it undoes all of the character development that culminated through the Thor movies and into Ragnarok. Because at the end of Ragnarok, he does accept his position as being king of the Asgardians.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like it does ruin that in a way. Um, I mean, like I said, I kind of like the idea of him becoming one of the Guardians of the Galaxy because I think the interaction between those characters is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. Like that, it does kind of like. But I also wonder too if the idea of like what happened with Thanos and everything, and with the people that he cared about, like kind of going away and dying and stuff like that. Like, I wonder if that really like hurt him to the point where it's like I can't do this anymore, and he's trying to like because after he beheaded Thanos, he kind of goes off into obscurity, and really he had already kind of like stopped being a king. Like he kind of like went into himself,
Right. I mean, he was
and I
king
think
in
like
name only. Um,
right. Whereas like he's kind of doing the same thing, but like he's kind of like running away from things and like kind of giving up that to somebody else.
mhm,
And it's like where all the events that have taken place have affected him to the point where it's like I think he feels like he needs a like fresh start, and maybe that, like I said, that is a selfish thing,
mhm.
but I think with everything that took place, like I think he maybe feels like he needs to like go away for a while.
But he didn't have to give up his kingship.
No, true.
Yeah, he could have
But
just
then
said
like
like, "Hey, I'm still down to be king, but the things that have happened, I just kind of need to step away from it a little bit, And I said, and like, and just like, hey, you've been doing such a great, to Val, because he gives it over to Valkyrie. And it's like, and so he could have just said like, hey, you're doing such a great job, those years that I wasn't, you really stepped up as a leader, those years that I wasn't, a good leader. So why don't hold down the fort for me.
true. Um, but yeah, I could see like that too is a point of weakness in
Mm.
the story with Thor.
Right. Yeah, because like,
Um,
even if he did that, he'd still be shirking his responsibilities.
yeah, I could just see like why like that's a part of like why he may have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like but I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Word.
Well, moment of truth. What's your rating for the movie?
For the movie, you know what? Despite the flaws, I'm still gonna give this a 5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, I completely recognize the flaws and maybe the plot holes or like the inconsistencies, but on the whole, it was such a satisfying conclusion. Like especially for the characters, more or less. I'm gonna give it a 5.
I'm gonna give it slightly lower than that, but it's a 4.5 for me.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I think it's like I said, it's a great movie. It's a satisfying end to some of the characters that we know and love. And I'm actually kind of like now seeing the new Spider-Man trailer and seeing a post Endgame world and like how they deal with that.
Hmm.
It looks like it's going to be a very interesting movie.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I saw the trailer last night, and the initial trailer wasn't that great, but having the benefit of watching Endgame and them now allowed to share a little bit more of what Far From Home is going to be like. I'm I guess the word would be excited to see
Yeah, I
what
am.
to see what comes next.
I'm pretty excited to see it as well.
Hmm. Yeah, especially if they're gonna like start going into multiverse. But I hope they don't like bring back people that way because that would just like cheapen everything that they did. If there was like an alternate Tony Stark, an alternate Black Widow. Just don't do that.
Right. Well, the only one that like so far that could be an alternate of is Loki.
Right, right, and that's within like the established events of Endgame.
Right. And that I'd be okay with because that would match up with
Right,
what
because
they're doing.
it was set up. It was set up. He teleports away with the Tesseract. So there could be an alternate Loki out there.
Right. But yeah, no, I'm probably gonna watch it again.
Hmm.
And
I would
but
be
yeah,
down to watch it again as well.
yeah. So we might do that on Thursday. I'll keep you informed on that.
All right, for sure.
But yeah,
All
great,
right.
great, great conclusion to the story. And yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like an end of an era in a sense.
Right. Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, Endgame and maybe Spider-Man: Far From Home might be the getting off point for the MCU. Particularly, because of the trajectory that it looked like it's gonna be going. Particularly, with Captain Marvel.
Ugh.
Um, that's not to say that I'm gonna be stopping. I'm gonna stop watching MCU films altogether. I'm gonna watch Far From Home, but
We'll
and
see.
we'll see.
See how it
And then
goes.
if the Black Widow trailers look promising, I might check out one of those. I might check it out.
Yeah, we'll see how this new like set of Marvel films goes. I'm always interested in new stories and all that stuff. And if anything, I will say it has piqued my curiosity into some of the characters, and like I kind of want to like read more about them. And uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you have it. That was our review. I know we went really long tonight. We almost, we basically recapped the entire movie. Um, but safe to say that me and Robert both enjoyed this movie, and we definitely recommend it. Particularly
I
after you watch the entirety of the MCU thus far.
yeah, if you're just like this is like you're just jumping into like the MCU for the first time at Endgame, uh, not a great idea.
Right. I mean, not to say that you
Because
you know that you
you
that you
can't enjoy it,
can't
but
enjoy it without having seen the entirety of the MCU. We're not that we're not necessarily saying that. It's but you'll enjoy it far more uh, if you do watch the other MCU movies as opposed to not.
right.
Right. It'll
At the
just be
very
so.
least,
It'll be
watch
that much more satisfying.
yeah, at the very least, watch Infinity War.
Yes. Yes, because that in itself is a great movie.
Yeah.
All right, well, there you have it. That'll do it for us tonight. I hope you enjoyed uh, the show. I know we went, longer than we usually do by a factor of two, but
Yeah.
this is reviewing a once in a lifetime movie. I dare say is worth it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you will join us next week as we do every single week around 8-ish o'clock Tuesday nights. Don't forget to check out the library of other shows that we have. The main podcast, Circle of Jerks podcast. This show, Nocturnal Transmissions, and Robert's show, Up by Up Down. Don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts, Twitter at PodcastCOJ and Instagram at Circle of Jerks Podcast. And for Robert and myself, we'll say goodnight, and we'll see you next time. Don't
Peace.
do anything I would.